and this is the next installment in the South Tigris series, which is part of the bigger series offered by Garphill Games, and this is also the one that I think I would like the most. I love dice worker placement, which is the main focus of the South Tigris series, but this one also looks like it's a little bit less complex than their previous release, which for my own taste felt like it was just asking a little bit too much for me, whereas I think this one is going to hit that sweet spot that I really like in my Euro games. And because of these reasons, this one is my own personal pick of the week. But in this game, players are going to be exploring the world, discovering different scrolls, hiring translators in order to translate those scrolls, and then gain the wisdom and knowledge in order to score victory points. Players will be starting the game with their own player board that they'll be able to upgrade throughout the game, as well as influence tokens that will be basically placed on any areas of the board where you're performing different actions, indicating that you did have an influence there, and at certain points in the game, those will earn you benefits. Players will also be using a draw bag where you're going to be drafting different colored dice in order to perform your actions, but players will also get a hand of action cards as well as a goal card that they can complete for different benefits, as well as a starting scroll and tokens to mark their location on the map board and the different research tracks. Each round, players are going to be drawing dice from the dice bag and then rolling them in order to determine what they have available to perform their actions. Players will be choosing an action card from their hand and then assigning it to one of the action spaces on their main board. And then you can assign up to 2 dice to the card that you just played, because each action could have different requirements like a minimum number of pips or a certain colored die that you need in order to perform it. Players will also be gaining these different colored worker meeples, and if you have those, you can also use those to modify the value of your dice or to make it act like it's a different color. And the action you're performing is represented by the icon underneath the action space where you put the card, not the action that's actually on the card. I'll come back to that later. But the different actions you have available to you on your board are to recruit a translator, and when you do that, you can do one of 2 things. You can either discard a translator from this top row in order to gain the benefits of that card, or instead you can pay silver to hire that translator, which would move that card to this bottom row, putting your influence on it, indicating that you are the one that hired it, but then that translator is going to be available for all players if they choose to use it to translate scrolls in the future. But in order for players to translate scrolls, they're going to have to find them first, and in order to do that, you can take an action to move your token around on the map track, and then you'll be able to pay to move a scroll adjacent to your current location on that track into one of the 3 columns in these houses of wisdom. And once you have scrolls into the houses of wisdom and translators that are able to translate that specific language, you can use an action to pay a hired translator to translate that scroll. When you do that, you'll gain the benefits of that scroll, and then you'll also be keeping that card for its victory points. But the cool thing about this is that a translator can only be used a certain number of times before that translator retires. And when a translator retires, that card is actually going to go back to the player who originally hired it, and you'll be able to slide it under one of the action spaces on your board, which is going to grant you bonus actions every time you go to use that action. And just like you can use an action to move your token around on the map board, you can also use an action to move your token up on a research track. And of course, this will just gain you benefits in that specific track depending on what you moved your token into. But the final action you can choose to do is to rest, and this is where your cards come into play, because whenever you rest, you're going to be getting the benefits of the different cards that you played into the action spaces, and then those are going to be going back into your hand. But as players complete the different scrolls, you're going to be drawing new scrolls from the scroll deck and then adding them onto the empty areas of the map. But there's 4 special cards that are strategically placed within that deck, and each time you draw one, instead of it getting added to the map, it's going to be moving up into this special area of the board instead. And when these cards come out, they're going to trigger all sorts of victory points and bonuses to the players that have the most influence in each of the houses of wisdom. But once that 4th card is drawn, that's going to trigger the end of the game, and then you're going to have a final round, tally up your victory points, and the player with the most victory points wins the game.